So I think we'll get going actually. So welcome to the System1 Super Bowl webinar 2025. It's really, really exciting to be doing this, and thank you so much to everybody who's joining us. And I want to say a really big thank you as well to everyone behind the scenes who's put this together. We may talk about it later, but there's a big operation that goes in overnight to test everything that you saw while watching the Super Bowl. We test it overnight and put the results together with all the trends and commentary and turn it into this webinar now. So I just want to say a big, big thank you to the team at System1 for doing that. So joining me on this webinar to help go through the ads, analyze what happened and talk about what they mean, we've got Jennifer here from BBH. So hi, Jennifer.
Hello, hello.
I thought, would you mind introducing yourself, what you do? And I'd love to know your favorite Super Bowl ad of all time and which one this year stood out for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jennifer Baldwin. I'm the head of strategy at BBH USA. So yeah, I'll start with the favorite Super Bowl ad of all time, right? So that one, I was thinking about this and Volkswagen's The Force really comes to mind. I think like, oh my gosh, it's such a charming story. I was watching it again this morning and thinking about this. And it's just no narrative, no dialogue, just the theme song and just like these little touches. So charming. Um, from last night, kind of a similar theme, like in a year with so many celeb ads, like the Google Pixel ad really stood out, like leaned into emotion without having to rely on a celebrity to tell the story, and kind of continuing that Google tradition of using powerful human stories to showcase technology, like the Dear Sophie ad from nearly 30 years ago. Just always just great storytelling with tech.
Fantastic choices. Thank you, Jennifer. And then we've got Taz here, excuse me, joining us from Wieden and Kennedy, currently in Toronto, normally based in New York. But Taz, good to see you, mate.
Hey, good to have, sorry, thanks for having me. So I'm Tass, good to meet everyone. The global strategy lead on McDonald's at Wieden and Kennedy, based in New York. Although I have spent a lot of time in London, as you can tell from the accent. So for me, and it's quite personal. My favorite Super Bowl ad of all time is definitely Halftime in America, the crisis spot that actually Wieden did. I'm not being, just self-serving. I wasn't working at Wieden at the time, and it was the year before I went to America, so it was my last Super Bowl from the UK. I was just blown away by it. Just the message, the delivery by Clint Eastwood, the ballsiness, the boldness of taking 2 minutes, the fact that it was at halftime and the message, the post-recession, post thing. I still remember the words, right? It's like halftime in America and the second half is about to begin. I get chills speaking about it. So I will say I don't think any ad lived up to that yesterday, but I've got loads of ads I loved. So and so then I'm going to go completely opposite and go very dumb and very unserious and say my favorite ad yesterday was the Mountain Dew one with Seal as a seal singing about lime Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
So sorry if I went really high and then I brought it back down, but
I loved it. And of course, they've got a bit of previous there, haven't they, with Puppy Monkey Baby as well. So it felt tonally very consistent with the Jew personality. Also joining us on the call, Vanessa, who's SVP for Marketing at System1, but used to be a System1 client managing Aldi. So fascinated, Vanessa, because to know what your favorite Super Bowl ads would be.
All right. So my favorite Super Bowl ad of all time has to be Farmer's Dog Forever. I cannot watch that ad without my entire body being overtaken with emotion, and change the way that you think about what you feed your pet. And similarly, how I look at things differently. Last night, Uber Eats, the conspiracy, and from every football play to nickname, to even Super Bowl licks. I looked at everything differently and thought that was incredibly fun. And just one joke after another was incredible.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Great choices again. So to everyone watching at home, in the office or whatever, then just to let you know, there's a Q&A as well. So if you'd like to ask any of these fantastic panelists any questions, pop it into the Q&A. We're going to have a halftime commentary and we're going to have a full-time wrap up at the end as well. So please do put your comments there. We'll do our very, very best to get some as we go through. All right. And also, by the way, a big hello to everybody on LinkedIn. So our good friends at the Drum are putting this live on LinkedIn. So hello to everyone on LinkedIn. Good to have you join us for the show. All right. So without further ado, let's get into it. There you go. There's our faces. So there you go. You've just heard from us. This is your panelists for today. All right, quick running order. What we're going to do now, a super little quick spin through our methodology, just so you know how we calculated the scores and what they mean. We're going to count down, we're going to look at, the Super Bowl by numbers, bring a bit of data, some pattern post-match analysis to bear, so you can see what the trends were from this year. Then the important bit, the MVPs, who won and who topped the rankings. Vanessa's going to count that down. You're going to see some of the best ads as well that created the most emotional response in the audience. Then what we've tried to do is condense everything we learnt from that into a playbook. So what are the main plays that you can take away from this to apply to your brands? We'll also have a couple of opportunities to talk amongst ourselves. So halftime show, as I said, and we'll try and wrap up with your questions at the end. All right, so we'll spin through this next section fairly quickly because I know you want to get into the numbers and the winners. All right, so how do we do what we do? Well, at System1, we believe that emotion matters because it's been proven from the likes of Daniel Kahneman and the research that we've done that how you feel influences how you act. And therefore, for advertising to work, it needs to create an emotional response. And so what we do is we measure emotion and we turn that into a star rating. The star rating is a prediction of how likely people might be in the long term to act based on what they've seen. Now, of course, that's the long term. We also know that marketing is made up of long and short. And so we do the same thing in the short term as well. Slightly differently, in the short term, we're looking at the strength of emotion and the speed with which people recognize who you are. There's no point creating an emotional response if people don't connect it back to your brand. So we measure those two things, and that comes together for a spike rating. The final one, fluency, as I said, this is the ability for people to remember you. So we measure just the number of people that can remember the ad having seen it, right? So this isn't like, a long time in the future. This is having seen it. Do they remember who you are? And you'd be surprised to know that something around 20% of people that will see an ad even last night won't be able to remember who it is having just seen it. So it's really important that you make sure your brand is center to your narrative. Now, this is the sort of sciencey bit. So if it's a L'Oreal advert, we cut to the little science bit, explaining how the magic happens. But we basically ask people how they feel based on universal human emotions. We ask them how strong that emotion is, and then we translate those emotions into a prediction. And we do this based on the fact that we've done this over 100,000 times, and we've looked at the relationship between which emotions are evoked, how strong those emotions are, and the market share that campaign delivered for the brand. So this isn't just us doing it because we want to, we're doing it because actually this is predictive of in-market behavior. Now, how do I know that? Well, this is the most boring chart in the presentation. So it literally will be 15 seconds. If you were to look at the relationship between how much money you spend and your market share change, there's a loose correlation. That's on the left, 0.25, right? If you were to overlay the creative on top of it, so the emotional response to the advertising itself, as well as the amount of money you spend, it shoots up to 0.8. Now, this is looking at a particular category in the UK. We've then replicated this across over 250 different categories and brands across the world. And on average, the correlation is 0.67. So it's strong. So the correlation between creative quality, the media spend, and market share is very strong. To put that into context, if you were to look at the correlation between quarterback earnings and yards taken in a game, it would be about the same. So in other words, that this approach is as predictive as money in NFL, right? So that gives you some kind of comparison to what we're talking about. So it does matter. All right. Now, so this might surprise some people actually, because the Super Bowl is the biggest stage on which brands kind of communicate, and the most amount of money is spent on. Surprisingly, actually, the average star rating may not be quite as good as you might think. So in the US, the average star rating is 2.3. It's on a scale of 1 to 5. The average Super Bowl is around 2.7, 2.8. It tipped up to 2.9 last year. So again, it's a little bit better. And what we tend to find is there's a big spread. So you've got amazing advertisers up in the 4 and 5 star area, but you've also got quite a lot of 1-star ads. So there's quite a sort of spread that you see on game nights. Now, I thought I would put our guests on the spot. Now, Vanessa's not allowed to ask this question because she happens to know the answer because she wrote the slide. But I'd love to know, Jennifer and Taz, what do you think this year's result was on average?
I don't know. I'm going to go a little higher. I think maybe I'm going to go for 3.
I like that. I like the positivity. I was going to go for 2.9. So we're recovering, but we haven't passed the 3 barrier.
Is this like a Price is Right thing? So the closest without going over. So
Exactly. There you go. And I should have brought some prizes. We have pink footballs in the office, but imagine there's a pink football here. We're playing for the pink football. Jennifer, congratulations. This is the first time, and we've been doing this for many, many years, the first time we've averaged a 3 star. So big congratulations to everybody, which is really impressive. Around 25% of the ads last night were 5 and 4 star, which is really good. Put that into context. In the US, only about 5% of ads are 4 and 5 star, and we saw 25% of the ads last night. This is what I mean in terms of, like, being quite a big difference between the top and the bottom. So congratulations, well done. Taz, you were very close, my friend, so just 0.1 off there, so well done. All right, so a couple of, in terms of trends, this is an interesting one. So there's usually quite a big difference between rookie advertisers and returning advertisers, because what we find is that people who've got a track record of Super Bowl advertising tend to outperform those advertising for the first time. It was a very good show last night for the rookies. So as you can see, the rookie advertisers at the bottom were very close to the average at 2.8, and then the returning advertisers at 3. So big congratulations to all the new advertisers there who had a really good show yesterday. And then another bit of analysis we did last year, which was quite interesting. And again, the trend has changed a bit this year. Last year, we saw a 1-star difference for fluent devices or distinctive assets versus celebrities. So the Super Bowl, around 2/3 of Super Bowl adverts have a celebrity in. So it's the one time where actually having a celebrity in doesn't give you a particularly strong point of difference. And actually what we found historically is that owning your own device, if you think of M&M's characters, the Budweiser Clydesdales, for example, the things that are associated with your brand that you own tend to outperform having a celebrity. This year is much closer, actually. Now, one of the reasons I think, again, slightly speculating, we saw lots of new brand devices, new fluent devices that maybe are not as well established. So Clydesdales obviously have a huge history, but some of the ones you can see on this slide were quite new for this year. So that may be explaining a little bit about why they were so close. Now, a big shout out to our friends in B2B to up their game. So probably the big difference we saw when we cut the data was looking at B2C versus B2B. I think we all agree that B2B advertising typically is more boring than B2C. So a big challenge for next year to see if our friends in the B2B department can take some lessons from the great work that we see in B2C. All right, so the big question now is who won and what does the top 10 look like? So I'll hand over to my esteemed colleague, Vanessa. Thank you so much for doing this. And over to you to reveal 10-1.
All right, great. Thanks, John. Yeah, incredible work from all the brands, agencies, production companies, agent talent, everyone involved in all the creative. Really phenomenal night. And the ink is just dry on this one because the team was up very late last night, crunching all the numbers. And we've got, a unique set of 10 that we didn't expect. So I will go 10-1. All right, so what I'm going to do for most of them is just give a quick highlight, and then for the top 3, I will actually play the ads. So coming in at number 10 is Reese's with Eric and Coleman. So the Hershey Company leaning into their slapstick comedy once again. So that was a really fun one for us to shout about at the office. Don't eat the lava. All right, and number 9, Nerds is back with Digitas Chicago for their 2nd consecutive year. Definitely the candy taking the country by storm. And number 8, we've got Pfizer with their 2nd consecutive year with an inspirational narrative, ringing the bell. And number 7, we are all so grateful that Crash the Super Bowl is back with Doritos, and Dylan Bradshaw bring incredible performance there. Going on to the next, number 6 with Stella. Hold on one second. Just got to make sure my slides are going. Stella with Artist Equity. Once again, leveraging David Beckham and bringing along Matt Damon for the ride. Number 5 with Haagen-Dazs and Nice and Frank, bringing in the Fast and Furious, or rather not so Fast and Furious. And number 4, the NFL and 72 and Sunny with an inspirational 2-minute ad, similar to a John Hughes film. All right.
I liked a lot. Oh, we're not talking about those ones. Look at me breaking the format. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, just because a few of the ones I like the most were in some of those. So like Haagen-Dazs, again, a lot of ads try and do so much in the Super Bowl, and I just like a simple storyline, a product truth. And again, just taking a cultural reference and then sort of flipping it in order to create something interesting. So
Great.
I think we might have lost Tass there for a second.
Tass. So I think I'm going to keep going if you guys still have me. So, all right. So it wouldn't be an ad review without watching some ads. So for the top 3, what we're going to do is we're actually going to show you our System1 face trace, which is definitely the most fun thing that we put together, which is showing you the second-by-second emotional response to the ad and how it changes as you experience the work. So coming in at number 3 is WeatherTech and Pinnacle Advertising.
Catch your motor running. Get out on the highway. Looking for adventure. And whatever comes our way. Yeah, I gotta go make it
B12.
Bingo! Don't worry, girls. I've got WeatherTech. Born to be wild.
For whatever comes your way, there's WeatherTech.
From what I understand, the grannies actually attended a Super Bowl party with the advertising brand teams yesterday. So hopefully they had a really good time.
I mean, that's such a departure from what they've done traditionally. So it was really interesting to see that they did so well this year, taking a more creative approach rather than the more like functional or more emotional approach, I should say, rather than the more functional approach.
For me, I think this wins the most fun I'd have on a production as well. They just look like they're having so much fun, didn't they? You could see, which I think comes across brilliantly. And I love as well that it's older people, and we'll see that again come up in other spots when we talk to Tass about McDonald. But it's great to see older people as the heroes, you know, living it large, as it were. Vanessa, do you want to take us to number 2?
Yeah, number 2. All right. So, and speaking of crashing the Super Bowl, the NFL has crashed our top 10 twice with their Flag 50 and with our number 2, which is I Am Somebody, again, 72 and Sunny, with an incredible story. Why don't we watch?
All right, ready, guys? You guys gotta be loud, though, okay? Hey, let's go! Let's go! Okay, repeat after me.
Yes, sir.
I am somebody.
Somebody.
I may be young.
I may be young.
But I am. Somebody.
Somebody.
I may be small.
I may be small.
But I am.
Somebody.
My clothes are different.
My clothes are different.
My face is different.
My face is different.
My hair is different.
My hair is different.
But I am. Somebody.
Somebody.
I must be respected.
I must be respected.
Protected.
Protected.
Never rejected.
Never rejected.
But I am.
I am.
Somebody.
Somebody.
I am. Somebody. I am. Somebody. I am. Somebody. I am.
Somebody.
right, moving on to number one. And I definitely have to give a shout out to the city of Chicago. So while I'm currently sitting in New York, my heart is in Chicago. It's where I live. It's a great ad town, and Chicago showed up several times in our top 10. Our number one is with Lay's and High Dive.
If I was a flower growing wild and free, I'd want you to be my sweet honeybee. And if I was a tree growing tall and green, all I'd want you to shade me, be my leaf. If you were a river in the mountains tall, the rumble of the water would be. If you were the winter, I'd know I'd be the snow, just as long as you were with me when the cold winds blow. I'd be a nod. If you were a seed, well, I'd be a pod. If you were a floor, I'd want to be a rug. And if you were a kiss, I know I'd be a hug.
That happiness trace. Unbelievable.
Amazing. Amazing. Beautifully crafted. Wasn't it Taika Waititi that did that one, I think, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very impressive. Well, I thought it'd be nice to kind of go round at half time and just chat to our panelists about what they thought, what stood out, and maybe some of the lessons we can learn. Taz, we got you back, my friend. I think I saw you pop back into the virtual room. That could be a no. In which case, Jennifer, why don't we go to you? So I'd love to know, well, firstly, just which of the top 10 sort of stuck out for you and why?
Yeah, well, I definitely, like I was saying, I think, I got dropped from the Zoom for a second. So was the Google ad, was that in the top 10? I know that was my favorite from last night.
Didn't quite make it, but by
Didn't
the way,
quite-
I totally agree with what you said about it, because it was a beautiful story. It didn't rely on celebrities, a real insight as well. And also I thought Google was kind of like part of the idea, wasn't it? Which is
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like I mentioned at the upfront, I think like, BBH's Dear Sophie nearly 30 years ago, I think like set that gold standard of like, using tech, to like tell a very human story. I mean, the tech has evolved. I mean, that was Gmail. This is AI powered phones, but I think that approach still really works. I think like of the work that, did well, Ram was in the top 10. That was one I really liked last night too.
Not in the top 10, but maybe just to repeat the top three: weather tech and NFL and Lay's.
Oh yes. So I mean, I think Lay's, like you were just saying, I think they're so charming, and the track I think was brilliant too, just to like kind of pull you into that kind of emotional story, and the obviously the care that the girl was putting into into growing the potato plant. I do think it's interesting that it's not necessarily something you expect from Lay's, but maybe that like works to their advantage as well. You're showing a different side of the brand, the kind of care and the care for the farmers that kind of go into the production of the potatoes rather than the snacking moment itself.
Actually, one of my colleagues, Orlando, has written this incredible book called Look Out, where he looks at what he describes as left and right brain features. And the right brain features that he describes in his book are exactly what Lay's are doing really well. So he would talk about like a story that unfolds, a familiar scene, the fact that it's on a farm, it's in the countryside, there's, blue sky, green fields, that kind of thing. And he also has this lovely phrase I love, which is betweenness, which is kind of that emotion when you see people interacting with each other. Like you've got the mum looking out the window, you've got the girl tending to the plants, that sort of thing. So all those little kind of signs of kind of human interactivity and emotion are all really, really strong. And the other thing that as well he talks about a lot is a melodic soundtrack. And I think that the soundtrack to that is beautiful, because it just kind of it feels appropriate to the scene as well, but it's also sort of, it creates an emotion, doesn't it? Even the sounds as you listen to it makes you feel something.
Yeah, and again, that like it's not relying on a lot of dialogue. It's just you're just visually you're like attuned to what's going on. The soundtrack pulls you in and you're watching the action unfold, which I think can be a really powerful storytelling tool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I know there's actually less of a debate this year, but usually people are, oh, we've just lost Jennifer. Vanessa, it's you and I. So
Okay.
there we go. So, well, maybe we should talk about one of the ads I know you liked in particular, which is from the NFL. You mentioned this in your commentary that NFL scored two top tens, which is incredible. And they've got a bit of a track record at the Super Bowl of producing, high scoring work. And this year to go on and do two was incredible. But maybe talk about the second one that wasn't in the top three, but was just outside at number four, which stood out a lot, didn't it?
Sure. Yeah, the Flag 50. So, there were certainly last night a lot of different pieces of work that touched on, women empowerment for, girls and, really having that strong focus between Dove and Novartis, Nike. But there's something very magical about this particular work. And actually, the teams definitely stayed up later last night when this ad came through because we thought we had our top 10. And then this ad came through and kind of rock the boat. And I think just in terms of thinking about contextually, who is watching the game? You're with your family, you're with your friends, you've got kids there. And there was an element of having a really strong, powerful message and wrapping it up in a really fun and entertaining, well-crafted story. John Hughes film-esque that just really captured everyone's hearts and really is a phenomenal piece of work.
It did, didn't it? Actually, and talking about that as well, another one that I know that you liked, you put Michelob Ultra's spot on your LinkedIn, didn't you? And it went absolutely wild. Everyone reacted to it, very strongly, which is great. What was it about the Michelob ad in particular that you think people are responding to?
Yeah, I would relate it almost similar to the fandom of pickleball. There is something that everyone like the barrier to entry is lower, than it is for tennis. Being able to, the equipment's not as expensive. Picking up the game, you can pick it up a little bit faster, and essentially pickleball took the country by storm. And there's an element of this particular work, the hustle, that everyone felt energized. And it didn't matter if you were young or old, you felt energized by the work and something that you felt essentially you can embody and relate to the emotion that they were experiencing in the ad.
Now it was a Wieden and Kennedy spot, so I should give a little plug out as Taz returns into the virtual room. While I've got him before his connection breaks, Taz, any kind of inside tips on what made the Michelob work so good?
You can tell how mortifying this is. I've been promised. I had the IT guy out of sight. He promised me this won't happen again. But yeah, I mean, I think the guys are very proud of it. They've been having a bit of a run. You might have mentioned in the time I missed the one last year scored really well with Messi. So again, it's just the mix of storytelling, use of celebrities. I loved some of the points. I caught the tail end of Vanessa talking about, seeing, a few older celebrities actually having a moment, which we saw in WeatherTech as well, which I love to see. A bit like the chance of the mustaches and the eyebrows also being, a trend yesterday. So, and then again, the role for the brand, I think, has always had for years now, being able to play in space, in athletics and sport in a credible way, which is hard for an alcohol. And so just continuing that and finding new ways into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw quite a lot actually on X, people talk about the connection with sport, that low and no alcohol beer is having a moment, and the sport connection kind of, connects that quite well.
Exactly. I mean, it's, low alcohol, again, Ultra was there before the no alc trend. And so it's, again, I don't work on the brand, but it's impressive to sort of try and maintain obviously they have no alc products as well, but now that everyone has a no alc offering, I guess everyone could be about sports. So how do you maintain that positioning is key for them.
Yeah. Jennifer, one question that a lot of people ask is can $8 million possibly be worth it? And I just love to know your perspective on that as as a planner. Do you often recommend Super Bowl ads, or do you get into debates with your clients about whether to do a big game ad or not? What sort of goes into the thinking behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, it seems like an obvious point, but I mean, it is one of the few times of the year people are like actively engaged and, giving their attention fully to advertising. And so, I mean, $8 million, obviously, that is a lot of money. But I think, like, we have these conversations all the time about how do we like find channels in which we can actively win our consumers' attention. And just the fact that today we're having this conversation, I've had conversations all day long about the ads, like in and outside of the industry, the ads last night. So it is a time for brands to command a stage, get people talking about them, and you can leverage, the power of, creativity in all its might in order to kind of get those types of results. I mean, it's so difficult to do in this day and age. I think like it's one, I think like, you never can get that type of attention outside of the Super Bowl, like to have that stage to really talk about your brand and what it stands for.
There's an argument, I think, actually, that it's getting even better value because of the point you made about today with such, fragmented media landscape. It's one of the few opportunities there is remaining where everyone's getting together and experience the same thing at the same time. Because, our feeds are so curated now, aren't they, based on our interests, that this is the one thing that we're all served up the same ad and we all talk about it afterwards.
I think like it's a really good point too, because I think it's not just the moment of the game itself anymore, because we can develop these big like 360 like stories leading up to it and then happening around it, like leveraging all the platforms to help kind of tell this complete story that can really kind of pull consumers in from all touch points. So I mean, it's $8 million, but then you're also fueling the whole kind of ecosystem around it to kind of take advantage of the moment.
Yeah. Well, actually, on that point, maybe a question for both of you is everyone celebrates Super Bowl and the creativity and the quality of advertising. Why don't we see that same standard the kind of the rest of the year? Or why don't we perceive that advertising is as good the rest of the year?
I mean, I think sometimes it can, it is the time where we really do have to invest in creativity. I think that's what everybody like places a really strong value on that, like leading up to the Super Bowl, like that becomes the objective to maximize the all eyes that are going to be on the game and on your brand. Whereas other times of the year, there may be a tendency to pull to things that may feel more functional and not leverage the power of emotion.
That's a great point. I mean, again, there's that like rule of thumb, whatever you're spending in production should be a decent percentage of what you're spending on media. So if you are spending that much on media, hopefully people invest in it more. I like to feel that, all your ads should be good. I know when we did Super ads, we didn't do one this year on McDonald's, but like most of our work is linked to a bigger program, is linked to a 4-week window, is linked to hard KPIs around traffic and sales. That the Super Bowl spot was always a luxury in that it didn't need to do that, and we didn't want to make it be part of something else. You want to treat the event as a special occasion, and so you can try different things that you might not do in the day to day.
Yeah. Great, thank you. I'll quickly go to some of the comments and then we can get into the second bit just to quickly talk through those. Raymond asked, what was the average star rating for celebrities last year? The answer to that was 2.7. So a slight improvement on celebrities year on year, which is good to see. Next question was, any negative aspects to any of the ads this year versus previous years? I think there's less negative ones. I mean, the bouncing barcode, I think was that last year, or the year before, generated quite a negative response. I think partly because the internet crashed when it did it. So there tends to be a few ads that do create some negative responses. I don't know, Jennifer, Taz, Vanessa, did you see any negative responses last night? I didn't pick too many up.
I mean, again, I'm always sensitive to talk about others' work. I did notice because I think the Pfizer ad hit the top 10, And so I thought that was a great ad, and a great message, and a great, again, role for the brand. I mean, for humanity. So I think a lot of people loved it for those reasons. I did notice, and I guess this is no bearing on, definitely not on the ad or the agency. It's Pfizer, right? We in the world where half people think they're an amazing company that saved us partly from COVID, and other half think that, well, hopefully not at the other half, but another fringe, God, now I'm sounding like, but you know what I mean? Like, I saw a lot of chatter online saying, oh, you're solving cancer that you created. So, which I think is a ludicrous claim, but that is the world we live in. So I don't know what RFK thought about the ad, but sure he had a different view from me. So
I think
My funny story from last year is I ended up being interviewed on ABC, which was a bit of a career highlight, on the sofa, and I called RFK JFK by mistake. So I was just like, oh no. I know when you like, I mustn't get it wrong. And then I did get it wrong. Anyway, sorry, by the by, but that was my little stumble this time last year.
I didn't see any negative. I think like the one thing which I actually think is interesting is that it's polarizing when you lean into like the really weird, like the seal. I've heard people you love it or you hate it, and I think, but it just shows the power of being a bit kind of left of center sometimes, where it's just you're going to get talked about. Sometimes it'll be negative, but it's all in getting attention.
have you done your cost of dull analysis yet? Did I miss that? No, or is that coming up?
No, well, it's we've just added some dull percentages into it actually as we've gone along, and most of the Super Bowl ads are getting some low dull scores, which is good. I think exactly because you want to create an emotion, and your enemy is neutrality, and that's kind of first and foremost what you want to try and do. Quick question coming in from the audience. What is the highest star rating? We thought 5 was highest. Sorry, I should always say that this is a common one. So the background to this is when we launched the 5-star system, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star, and that was it. And then what happened is all our customers started debating whether their 5 was a good 5 or a bad 5. And, they would see 2 5-stars. Well, which one's better anyway? So about 5 years ago, we went to what we call decimal stars. So we then divided the star into sort of 0.0 up to 0.9. So apologies, it's really a 6-star system, and there's nothing below 1 star. So it's 1 to 5.9 rather than 0 to 5, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's a common question. Surprised that Budweiser Clydesdales wasn't in the top 10. Oh, interesting one, because their 60-second pre-game ad would have been in the top 10, but their shorter 30-second one on the day itself slightly missed out. But that was I think a 4.5, something like that, in the pre-game one. So how many of the top 10 ads were optimized using System1? Well, one of them was that was Pfizer. So the Pfizer one was thoroughly tested through System1, and as was last year's, and they increased from 3.8 to 4.4. So lots of kind of work done on that. And by the way, if anyone wants to hear anything about that on my podcast today, in fact, I'm talking to the Pfizer CMO about exactly how they did that. How does average fluency compared to last year? Good point. We'll come back to that one. No one, if anyone, actually pays 8 million. Interesting one. That's true. I actually, do any of the people on the call have any inside intel on kind of what actually gets spent versus the claimed? I really don't know, actually. It's not my area of expertise.
That sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I can't say it's one that obviously a brand that is advertising Super Bowl, that's not the only amount of money they're going to spend with that network. Most likely, unless you save all your budget for just the Super Bowl. And so I'm sure, you get preferential rates, but I wouldn't say it's dramatically lower than what is headlined.
Some comments on fluency. I'm going to come back to fluency because I've got a chart on it in just a second. Last comment before we'll crack into the second half is surprised that Nike didn't make the top 10. I was as well, actually. I was as well. That I have to say, just from just seeing what they're doing, really feels like they got their swagger back. They've got their attitude. The production was beautiful. It's very, very impressive. They were mid 3-star, I think, so in the top half, but not in the top 10. Bit of a surprise. I did wonder, speculation, but I did wonder whether the kind of style and narrative fitted an Olympics or something more maybe than Super Bowl, which is more kind of for everybody, but that's speculation. All right, well, let's get into the second half, and then we'll come back and we'll try and answer any more questions in the second half. All right, so what we're going to do here is look at some of the standouts. So here we've got, now this is an interesting thing. I should probably just slightly explain this. The ability of star rating to predict market share change depends on your relative category performance. So if, for example, if you're in the beer category where the average is quite high, or confectionery or pet care, you need to outperform the category average. If you're in a low performing category like vaccines, for example, Taz, you're mentioning Pfizer there, just the subject matter makes it very hard to talk about. So actually getting a 2 or 3-star might be relatively a very good score. So what we've done here is just looked at who relatively outperformed the average for their sector. And this one probably correlates most to business effects. So WeatherTech, well done, because they operate in a very, very dull category. Taz, you're talking about the kind of dull factor here. NFL as well, a tough category as well, so they've done particularly well. Lay's obviously with 5.9, I mean, that's so high that it's going to perform well. And Pfizer as well, so corporate pharma advertising averages about 2.2, so they've done particularly well there. So they're some of the ones that stood out from that point of view. And then here we've got spike ratings. So again, we've done this based on long-term market share potential. And here we're looking instead at which ones we think have got the most potential to drive short-term sales. And this is quite interesting, actually, because a lot of food and drink. So it looks like people got hungry and thirsty yesterday while watching the Super Bowl. I don't know what the panel think about that. Is that what you'd expect? I mean, they're more impulse purchases, I suppose, aren't they?
Right, low category to purchase. Sorry, low barrier to purchase. I also did like Reese's was one of my favorites as well. Again, in that dumb, fun category. I did feel a lot of love, at least in the party I was at, for the Doritos ad, and I saw quite a lot of love online. We talk a lot about sharing the pen with fans and fan to fan on McDonald's. These guys have done it for years, right? And I think they were bringing back something they used to do. I actually had to Google that they actually made it, that the fans actually made the whole thing. They didn't just write the script, and they did. So credit to them.
Very good. All right, so this is what I was mentioning earlier. We did a chart here looking at fluency versus star ratings. So obviously it's important to drive an emotional response, but it's also important that people know who you are. Big call out, by the way, for Poppy as well. So well done to them, particularly as they are a relatively new brand, and yet they managed to score exceptionally highly in terms of branding there. And then as you move over to the right, increase in star rating and fluency as well. So you get to get an idea. The ones in the kind of outer edges there are doing emotion as well as branding at the same time. So that's what that's showing. What I thought I'd do now is ask Vanessa to run us through the playbook for how to deliver an effective ad. So what are the lessons, Vanessa?
All righty. Thanks, John. If you go to the next slide. All right, so couple things that System1 has been looking at over the last year is the magic of creative consistency and what being consistent, which is really hard to do, what it can do for your brand. So everything from creative executions to staying with the same agency, consistent positioning, consistent taglines. We look at a variety of different consistency measures, and we actually score it on the background. But from last night, there were 3 brands that stood out to us that were incredibly consistent in different ways. So Budweiser, this is incredibly rare to see 100 fluency score for a brand. We actually had to take a second look to make sure that this was accurate, but 100% of the people that viewed the ad knew that this was for Budweiser, and that's really special. I mean, it is tough to stick with the same thing, bring the Clydesdales all the way going back to 1986. I mean, it's been an incredible campaign for them, and to bring it back in such a really fresh, fun, really touching way and funny was great. Red Bull. This is not one that we were expecting, but refreshing. A long-standing campaign last night with a 98 fluency score. Red Bull gives you wings, and they've been able to extend that campaign in so many different ways. But they definitely crashed our fluency scores last night. And then Booking.com. Bringing the Muppets in, but every year, they bring in a different set of celebrities who's looking for their next, hotel stay. They bring the humor. It's just vibrant. It's fun. And they do a really exceptional job. So that would be the first one. Going to the next slide. All right, breaking free from category tropes. So really thinking about, what typical categories look like, whether or not, in the soda category, if it's more kind of what we would call salesmanship, buy, new flavor, new flavor, new flavor. While Mountain Dew was introducing a new lime flavor, they just went wild with this spot. And I think Taz had mentioned it. Exceptional spike rating. And just to reiterate what spike rating is, it's fast fluency, which means you knew immediately it was Mountain Dew. And then secondly, the emotional intensity. So this definitely made people feel really strongly. I know for myself, this song was in my head for at least 24 hours. Google. So Jennifer, your fan favorite, really, really touching story. I've got small children at home, and so I definitely felt this ad really strongly. But the emotional intensity with it, but it's a really tough job. We've been watching very closely all of the ads that are either using AI or selling AI, and how do you strike that right balance? So kudos to Google. And then Ram, wild, going outside of what a typical car ad is and bringing in, I never thought that the Three Bears and Goldilocks would be selling cars, but here we are, and kudos to them for an incredible score.
I think to pile on with the Ram thing, I think like that's another theme I kind of saw across last night, where you're taking kind of old and new and putting like an old, putting a new twist on something old. And so I think like the Goldilocks, but like ratcheted it up to this like action movie, and like kind of like kept getting kind of, layering in all these like unexpected elements from one second to the next. And with the charm of the acting, that was a really fun one.
Very hard to miss, wasn't it? In fact, it's very not dull, which nicely brings us on to the next slide, doesn't it? In terms of this is our least dull list. So actually, Taz, you're mentioning Pfizer. So Pfizer is officially the least dull ad of the Super Bowl. So it generated,
because it's the most polarizing, though.
Yeah. So it generated the most emotion overall. Which, combination of the topic matter, the brand, the way they tell the story, all those things together, which is incredibly impressive. So, the biggest enemy of advertising is, indifference, isn't it? So well done to them. You can see the other ones there. So Lay's did very well. Little Caesars coming up there as well. NFL, Reese's, WeatherTech, Hellman's. Hellman's actually was, that was one of my personal favorites. I mean, I was hoping for that to be in the top 10 because, absolutely genius, taking such an iconic kind of film scene and recreating it with their brand. Absolutely brilliant there.
I thought that was great. I did think, as I watched it again last night, having watched a few times, is she technically saying though that Katz's sandwich was dull and it needed mayo? So Katz might not do well out of it. Hellman's will, but they managed
Very
to
true.
pull the wool over their eyes.
There you go. I'm just overlooking Cats over here, actually, so I can almost see it out the window. There you go. I'm in the right part of Manhattan to go there. All right. So a bit of a shout out as well. You mentioned, I think one of the questions from the panelists were, sorry, not panelists, from the Q&A was, were any of these ads tested? Pfizer's a good example of one that was actually. And what's interesting here, this is the face trace from the Pfizer ad. And then what we're able to do in development with the team there is look at every single frame throughout the entire 60 seconds. Which emotion is it creating? Really importantly, why is that emotion being created? The really interesting thing actually about the Pfizer ad, if you remember it, is that it actually got to a peak about 2/3 of the way through, where it's like got the boy, he's got his arms in the air, Rocky style, we're going to knock you out, is the kind of peak message. in the ad, and then it cuts back to real life. Now, the interesting challenge that gave is you had the sort of fantasy dream of the boy imagining kind of getting out of hospital and the soundtrack, and then you have the heartwarming or the moving story as you see that it was actually a real story, and it shows photos from, you know, the boy being in hospital and then getting home. Now, the interesting challenge it gave the team is actually that dropped the emotion at that point because people felt sad, right? And so you lost the momentum, you didn't get the peak end at the end. So we worked a lot on particularly on the final third, to make sure that the cut back to reality was a happy story, not a sad story. And we worked on many different endings with the team. We also worked unbelievably with LL Cool J actually advising on how to use his soundtrack, and actually recommended some changes to it in the edit to give the right emotion at the right kind of, you know, in the right time. So it's amazing the amount of kind of forensic detail that goes into these things. So there's a good example to answer that question. Right, and oh well, there you go. This gives me a little plug. So apologies for the shameless plug at this point, but if you'd like to hear actually from Susan Reno, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Pfizer, talk about how they made the Super Bowl ad and a lot more about Pfizer and what they're doing to combat cancer and the 8 breakthroughs they're achieving to make by 2030, then just go and search Uncensored CMO wherever you get your podcasts. And as next week, Marcel Marcondes, who's just won Global Marketer of the Year, no less. Now, he knows about the Super Bowl because he's got a few brands in the top of our list in the AB InBev portfolio. So a real track record there. So that will be out next week. So do look out for that. And as well, additional resources if you want some inspiration. Vanessa mentioned this earlier in her commentary, but Compound Creativity, our very own Andrew Tyndall at System1 led this piece of work. It's exceptional, I have to say. Not just because he works for me, but it's exceptional anyway. But what he did is look at 50 different brands and the extent to which they're being consistent in their strategy, in their execution, in the way they work with their teams, the idea and so on, media choices, all that kind of thing. And really demonstrated the importance of being consistent, creatively consistent, and the evidence it delivers. So some fascinating insight there. The middle one, Not Another Dull White Paper. This is part of the Extraordinary Cost of Dull that Adam Morgan, Peter Field and myself presented at Cannes. Basically going back to the enemy is neutrality point about how do we defeat neutrality and engage audiences and make them interested in what we're going to do. And also tomorrow, we'll be releasing the full playbook for how to win the Super Bowl, all the learnings that we've taken from this year and also past years about what makes an effective Super Bowl ad. All right, so I'll leave that for a second if anyone wants to get their phone out and scan those barcodes, or you can watch back on playback and do that, then go ahead. All right, so I think now's the time to, as we've got 5 or 6 minutes left, to jump into the audience Q&A. So if you give me a moment, I will pop the Q&A up, and then here we go. Right. Oh, we've got quite a few questions. Okay, so in no particular order. So first question, celebrity or not, what should the prevalence of 55 plus talent tell us about the insights the brands are acting on? Ooh, that's a good one. Who would like to take that question?
What's the 55 ref? I might have missed that.
So basically, whether or not they have celebrities in, the fact that we're seeing more older people in advertising.
Oh,
what's the insight that sits behind that?
I mean, I was going to make a point about celebrities that never start with a celebrity, start with an idea. So that's just one, and then you know, if it has celebrity, great. The 55 plus, again, I know for years people have bemoaned that you're always focused on the youth, which is important for future growth, but that the older customer is so much more valuable right now. So it's that balance of long term and short term. So great that we're seeing some more golden stars in our work.
Right, Jennifer?
I was just gonna pile on. I think that I think it's like the chokehold nostalgia has on culture right now, like the power of the throwback star, but also like these, particularly like the celebs that were a bit older, like we saw Harrison Ford and last night, Catherine O'Hara, you know, like people who are known like across generations for a cross-generational audience. I think that's obvious. I think that may be one of the reasons they're driving to older stars. But I think like as Tass said, I think like even when we're trying to reach younger audiences, like start with the idea, because like you don't have to show your audience to appeal to that audience. So like, you know, start with a great story and use interesting characters in order to bring it to life. And then you can still kind of appeal to any generation.
Very, very
that
good point.
point.
A little plug actually. We did a bit of research a couple of years ago called Wise Up, looking at how older people are represented in advertising. And it's really interesting because our diversity study we run for the last 4 or 5 years now is called Feeling Seen. And the general insight is people want to see themselves in advertising. When they do, they feel more emotion, they feel a stronger level of emotion and connection with the brand when they do so. We've got bags of evidence for that being the case, except older people. Older people don't respond as well to seeing themselves, quote unquote, in advertising. What they do respond to is actually how they're portrayed. So the reason we called it Wise Up, not Feeling Seen, is actually older people want to be seen as useful to society, you know, making the joke, not the butt of the joke, being active rather than being passive, all those kind of things. So we called the report Wise Up, which is it's how you show, not whether you show them, kind of thing, which I thought was interesting because the WeatherTech ad and your Michelob ad both do a brilliant job of having older people as the heroes of the story, which I think was great. Super quick question here. Fluency trace, what's that? That's second by second, the percentage of the audience that recognize the brand at that point in the film. So we're aggregating up kind of everyone's ability to spot what it is. So you kind of see the pink trace bills. Nike's ad, how did that do? Mid 3-star, I think, he says. So above average, but didn't quite make the top 10. Are you going to look at the lowest performing ads? Well, if you go and sign up to testyourad.com, ladies and gentlemen, create an account, you can see every single ad. And in fact, you can get a report showing you face trace and all the short and long-term results. They're all available for free if you have an account. So do go and do that. It was the year of celebrity this year. What other themes were prevalent this year? Vanessa, any thoughts on the sort of general themes maybe that we're seeing this year?
You know, I think more and more we're just seeing really great stories. We're starting, I think throughout the year, we're starting to see longer form content and really letting that, you know, singular story breathe. It's almost like the original ASMR. You know, you feel really connected when you actually get to know the characters and you get to go on that emotional journey with the work.
I noticed one that, because I feel that creatively there'll be something someone tries one year and then it gets copied in future years. So I don't know if you call it like a brand integration or Subo integration. You know, years ago, Tide cut to the commentator and you're like, oh, is this, you know, Tubo did it as well, right? You cut to commentator. So I saw a few examples of that yesterday. That now feels old. Whereas, and I'm going to get it wrong. In my head, it's Ren and Stimpy, but it's not. It's a
Lilo
different
and
Disney.
Stitch. Lilo and Stitch.
Lilo and Stitch, exactly. My daughter's only 2.5, so we haven't got into the full Disney catalog yet. But they did an integration where they're running across the field, trying to be caught, stuff. I thought that was awesome. I really loved Rocket as well, right? The spot was awesome. So they kind of did both, right? You had a beautiful spot, great message, great track, role for the brand, and then suddenly the ad break finishes and the crowd is singing. What's the song? I'm forgetting. Is it Sweet Home Alabama or Sweet? Take me home, Country Roads.
Oh, yeah, that one, yeah.
Yes. So right. So then to Country Road. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
So again, that I've never seen that before, right? Like the soundtrack continues into the stadium of 65,000 people. I
That
mean,
was amazing, wasn't it?
yeah. So
Yeah.
I was blown away by those two.
Yeah, that was really good. Actually, Jennifer, this is, I might end with you on this one because this is one I know you and I have talked about before as well, about the role of seeing the products. Because someone here mentions that most ads will have the whole ad play through, a bit like WeatherTech, whole ad plays through and the reveal's only at the end. Any advice on how to kind of get your product front and center or what role it should play?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, you know, obviously with fluency, that can be so challenging because we're trying to land the emotion and sometimes we feel like the brand and the product can come at the expense of that. But I think, you know, I think like what we saw a couple things here this year were like brands were really using their like iconic assets in clever ways to help tell the story. So I think we saw like the mustache from Pringles, like being kind of a compelling way to kind of play with like something that's so associated with your brand, but as a way to kind of in a creative way that kind of engages the viewer. I think too, and I'll go back to like what we talked about at the top, like favorite ad of all time, the Volkswagen one. That, the Volkswagen did not come in until the very end, but it was pivotal, right? It was at this moment you see this kid trying to get something done with the force, and then finally it happens. And then you could never forget like I don't know what the fluency score was, but I imagine it would be strong because it's such a pivotal moment in the drama where, it all kind of the climactic moment where he finally gets what he was wanting. And so I think like it can come later as long as you can't have the story happen without the brand. Like it's that kind of magic moment in the drama.
Top advice set. Well, look, we've just come to our hour. So a massive thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Tass. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you to Team System1 behind the scenes who literally pulled an all-nighter to get all this data together so we could talk about it today. And by the way, if you want a copy of this, you'll get it automatically if you registered. Go to the System1 group, system1group.com website where you can download Cost of Dial, Compound Creativity, and Feeling Seen. There's a few references to Feeling Seen in the chat. So that talks about the impact of diversity on advertising. So thank you, everyone. It's been great to spend the last hour with you and look forward to doing this again next year.
Thanks, John.
John.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.